Flak! Woo! Alright!
Hang on. Okay, this has got to be a trap. Surely. Hey, bro. I bet you that base is fully fucking stacked. Full of loot. Can you imagine? Okay, honestly, in what world would anybody leave a base open like that with loot? It's a trap. I mean, come on. Burning furnaces, lanterns that are actually lit, and loot boxes? Come on, man. Use your brains. Yeah, but I've seen it happen before on Academy of Rust. I've seen it. I've seen people find loot. Academy of Rust fakes their fucking videos, dude. Use your brains. Oh, it's not impossible. I mean, I've seen it happen. Look, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not saying it's not gonna happen. It's just very unlikely. Imagine if there's rockets inside and C4. You know what, fuck it, just go for it. Woo, let's do this.
Surprise, motherfucker! You picked the wrong house, fool!
Fuck. Good evening, everybody. Flak is back, and today we are going to be discussing the automatic base trapping mechanism. Now, a lot of you guys asked in my previous video, how did I make the base that trapped that dude?
How are you guys tonight?
So upon initial inspection, you'll see you have a base, there's loot boxes, you know, you've got furnaces going. It is a very enticing base to enter. You can look around, you'll see that there are no trickeries. If you wait around long enough, you'll hear that there's nobody inside, so essentially it'll invite a person to come inside. However, once you go inside, you'll see a door controller, you'll see a laser, you'll be trapped inside. There's nothing you can do, you're stuck. And it's all thanks to that trap over there. And today I'm going to show you exactly how to build it. But before I do that, I need to explain to you guys the electronics needed in this build itself. So to begin, we're going to need a large battery. You cannot use a small battery because a small battery doesn't have enough charge to power all of these said devices. So large battery, we're going to need a splitter, a timer unit, the blocker, 4 ordinary switches, a laser beam sensor or the pressure pad that you put on the floor, either or, depending on what you prefer, and the door controller. Now before we get into the build, I have noticed that a lot of people do struggle with the understanding or the meaning of how electronics work. So I'm just going to explain to you quickly how each individual item functions so that you get a better understanding for the trap. Obviously, if you don't understand each component, you won't really understand how the trap works. So this is a small little demonstration to explain how it works. Let's start off with the blocker. Now the blocker's got the power input that it comes from a battery. It's got the power output that goes to an electrical appliance. And then it's got the block pass-through. Now if I apply power to this part, it will block this connection and the light will go off. So let's say, for example, I take a battery and I take a small standard switch. I pop the battery down over here. I can technically use the same power source, but I'm not going to because I want to make it as simple as possible. And I put a light switch over here. So if I make it go from the battery to the switch and I go from the switch straight to the blocker, the switch is off now. If I activate this and I provide a power source to this blocker, it will block this unit. So if I activate the switch, the light will go off. If I take the power away, it will allow pass-through because it blocks the pass-through, hence why it's called a blocker. That's the basic functionality of a blocker. And then you have a ordinary timer. Now the timer, if you activate it like that, it will go on for the prescribed amount of time. If you hold your action and you look at your duration, I've set it to 3 seconds. So if I manually activate it like that, it will stay on for 3 seconds and it will flip off. However, it's got a side input here called a toggle. Now toggle is on and off essentially. So if I take a switch, for example, a standard ordinary switch, and I pop it on the wall over here, and I provide a power source from the switch, and then from the output of the switch, I power the toggle. Essentially, if I flip this switch, it will toggle this timer on for 3 seconds. Turn it on, 1, 2, 3, and off. That's how the toggle works. So this is a manual activator when I activate it here. And if I provide this with electricity, it will automatically toggle it on. You see. So that's the basic functionality of how a blocker and how a timer works. So now we're going to use these in the build itself. So as mentioned before, what I'm going to be doing is showing you both configurations. The one is like this one, where you basically leave your front door open, hoping that someone's going to just wander into your base. And the other method you can do is the one where you physically stand outside your base. You find, you know, a cracker down there, and then once he starts chasing you down, essentially you would be running into your base and then activating the trap using certain switches that are here. This method in particular, where you bait people and you make them chase you down, I used in my previous episode. If you do want to see that trap working live on a live server, in a real live server, click on the link in the description. I'll leave the episode there. It's called episode 4. You should have a check if you want to see how the base works in real life. So I'm using a large generator for the purposes of the tutorial. However, you will require a large battery and a windmill to charge that battery. But for now, generator, just because it's demo. Okay, so first we start off with the splitter. Put the splitter on the wall, and we'll also provide a main switch so that we can turn the entire trap off when not needed and when we need to charge our battery. So first of all, we power our switch, and then from our switch we power our splitter. Next we need to install the blocker. Now the blocker is going to be feeding the door controller with power, and when we provide a side input here, it's going to block the signal to the door controller, meaning the door controller is going to shut. That's how the trip beam works. So let's start off first with the blocker. We need to provide the blocker with power, but I always like to add a switch before every component so that we can actually turn it off if need be. So I'm going to put a standard switch here, and then from the splitter we're going to provide the switch with power, like so. And then from the switch we're going to give the blocker some electricity. Now the blocker's output needs to go straight to the door controller because it needs to cut the door controller's power. This is a standard door controller. I'm going to put it over here on the wall, and I'm going to unlock the door code, activate it to pair it, you'll see the light, and then we're going to relock the door. Now what we're going to do is provide a power source to the door controller itself. So we have from the source of power going into a switch, and then from the switch going into the blocker, and then from the blocker we're going straight into the door controller. That means that if I give this electricity and I put it, is that on? Okay, now the mains are on, and that means that I can turn this on. If I turn this on, the door will go open. That is fairly self-explanatory. There is no power going into the side here, which means that it is allowing electricity through here. If I add electricity here, this will cut and the door will close, even if the switch is on or not. It will not make a difference. Next, of course, is the timer. The timer is the heart of the system, and it makes everything function. So I've got the timer over here, and as previously mentioned with the other components, we're going to add a separate power switch. This is quite essential because when you turn off the timer, even if it's in a big cycle, it will switch off and reset. This will serve as our reset button for the timer. I'll explain a little bit later why we need to do it, but it is quite essential. So we're going to give it some power. I'm going to try and make it as simple as possible. I'm going to make the wires nice and neat so I don't confuse you guys. And there we go. Okay, so from the splitter we are powering the switch, and then from the switch we are powering the timer. Okay, so from the splitter we've got power going to the timer's on and off switch, or its reset switch, and then from the switch to the timer itself. Now this timer has power. Now what we're going to do is we're going to hold it action, and we're going to set the time to whatever, a really long period of time. Doesn't matter, it's got to be a very long period of time, and I'll explain why in a second. Then once this timer activates, I want it to output its power to the blocker. The reason why we output it to the blocker is quite simple. Remember, once the circuit is on, that door is open. However, if it receives power on the side of the blocker, it will block the pass-through, meaning the door will close. So if I activate this now for its prescribed 10,000 seconds and I activate it, it will shut the door because it is sending power for 10,000 seconds to the blocker, and it's blocking that pass-through, meaning the door is closing. It is fairly simple to understand. The switch that we installed earlier I called a reset switch, and that is because this is currently busy running its 10,000 second course. It will not open that door again until I put it off and put it on. It has now resetted this timer, which means this timer is not running. If I activate the timer is running for 10,000 seconds, and it will run for 10,000 seconds until the battery is depleted or until the 10,000 seconds is up. So that is the way on how we reset the timer if we do trap somebody. If we trap somebody, ask them to hand over the weapon. Once they take their weapon, you say, "Thank you for your business. Get the fuck out of my base." Now we need to figure out how we're going to activate this, and earlier when I described how the timer worked, we use the toggle, and the toggle is going to be turned on via the laser beam or pressure pad on the floor, depending on which you prefer. Okay, so the final switch that we have, remember we needed 4, this is going to be the 4th switch over here, and what we're going to do is from the final input of that splitter, we're going to feed power to a ordinary switch. From the ordinary switch, we are going to go all the way to the laser beam, and then from that 4th switch, we're going to provide electricity to the laser sensor itself. Laser beam is now on, and then we're going to send the output signal to the timer's toggle. Okay, so let's discuss how the whole system works bit by bit. We've got our splitter, which powers the blocker. We've got the timer over there, and we've got the laser sensor, each with its own switch to turn each item off individually, and I'll explain why in a second. So we've got our laser beam on. The laser beam is currently on. The laser beam's output signal is going to the timer. It's going up there and it's coming down to the timer's toggle, which means that once you walk across that beam, it will output a signal and it will activate this toggle. The timer will then activate for 10,000 million seconds, which essentially means that this will output power for 10,000 million seconds to the blocker. But why is that happening? Because the blocker is feeding the door controller with electricity. So if this activates via the laser beam for 10,000 seconds, it means it will block the signal to the door controller for 10,000 seconds, meaning the door would close. Let's try it out. Door closed. He will not be able to open the door, and the door will stay shut for a 10,000 second duration. It is currently busy running now. To fully describe how this circuit works, I'm going to quickly change it to 10 seconds and you'll get a better understanding of how it works. So the switch is on. Once I trip this beam, the door will close, and the door will close for a duration of 10 seconds because it's outputting 10 seconds worth of power to our blocker that is controlling the door. There we go. This is the reason why we set it for so many seconds, so that whoever is stuck in the trap can stay there. So what I did in that video that I mentioned earlier when I actually live trapped people is I put a box on its side over here just to disguise the laser over there, and then when I put the laser, I put it down so that the laser beam hides just behind the box, so right over here, like such. Then I put a lantern over here, and it was crazy hidden. When Would-Be Raider comes, he will see nothing. Why is that? Because if we have a look over here, it's hidden because that light is being hidden by the lantern. However, sometimes it glitches through, but in the case that it does glitch through, it will show right over there, and it'll be hidden by sight from that box over there. So if we walk through it, it will, and yeah, they'll be trapped like rats. However, the laser beam is a little bit too obvious. That's why I prefer, which I couldn't find at the time of the video, the pressure pad. So let's take out the laser beam, we're going to add the pressure pad. The pressure pad works exactly the same as the laser beam. It's got a power in and it's got a power out. That power out will go to the timer, this one will go to the switch. So I'm going to do that quickly. And then from the timer itself, from the toggle of the timer, we're going to make it go to the output side of that switch. Remember, this is the reset button for the timer. We're going to reset it quickly, which means the door will open. And then if they walk on it, they'll be stuck. Let's test it from this side, and they'll be stuck. Yes, it does look very obvious. However, I did figure out a nice little counter for that. Have a look at this. So we know the pressure pad does stick out quite a lot. I did find out that a mat completely covers it up to the point where it goes flat. So when approaching the door, this is what would-be base enterer will see. They will see this, and they'll be stuck. That is the method that I use to trap people with a base like that, when your base is just standing there by itself doing its thing. Next, I'm going to show you the other method where you stand outside and you entice people to come inside. Very much the same, except the switch for the door controller and the switch for the pressure pad or laser beam will get moved right to the front there. So let's do that now. Pick that up, and I'm going to pick that up, and I'm going to show you how I move it. Fuck away. Okay, we are going to have a switch over here, and we're going to have a switch over here. What we're going to do is power one of them to go straight to the one switch. And this will go to the door controller. So the right switch is going to control the door controller, and then the left switch over there is going to control the pressure pad itself. So let's give that one power too. There we go. So, why have I done this? Because if I was to stand outside, delicious. If I was to stand outside and bait someone here by firing at them and making them chase after me, if they chased after me and I ran into my base, with the trap being active, the door would close and then you wouldn't be able to trap them. So essentially, this method of putting the switches on the side here is a way of being able to walk over the trap and not activating it. So if I fire at the guy and he starts chasing after me, all I have to do is run to my base, activate my pressure pad, activate my door controller, and then wait. He will then come around the corner and I will proceed to fight him. Bang, 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 bang. I will fall and die on purpose because it'll encourage him to come and loot my body. As he comes in and loots my body, so go fetch his free mad AK yo, and he stands on it, he'll be stuck. He'll have an AK, you just won't be able to do anything with it. You will, of course, once you die, respawn back in your base and stand here and laugh at him. You can flip the switches and go mental. It won't make a difference because this door controller is currently receiving 10,000 seconds worth of blockage via that blocker. I do hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope it was nice and simple and fairly easy enough to understand. As long as you understand the timer and the blocker, the rest of the circuitry is pretty much self-explanatory. I do hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please leave a like, leave a sub, and of course, until next time, Flak out. And this video was made possible courtesy of my glorious patrons. To the guys that you see on screen, thank you so much for supporting the Mr. Flak channel. If you would like to become socially involved with Mr. Flak, all my social links are in the description of the video, my Patreon, my Twitter, as well as my Discord, which is no longer toxic and has actually become fun. Until next time, boys and girls, Flak out.